Alright, in this video I want to talk about the rapture. Now, I heard somebody say that the rapture didn't come about until about 1800 and therefore it should not be followed. And it wasn't just this one person I heard it from. I've been hearing different denominations and different teachers say that, and that's their excuse for just ignoring the rapture. And then there's a lot of people who are saying, you know what, we just got to wait for the man of sin to be revealed. We're going to have to wait until after the tribulation for the rapture to happen. And then there's another group that says he's coming at any moment. So we got to keep an eye out. We got to be watching. We don't want to be one of the foolish virgins who's not watching. And I have to tell you that they are all right. But they're also wrong, and that's why it's all mixed up. These people all have pieces of the truth. Like I said in a previous video, I listened to different denominations and their teachers and people who are non-denominational, and I listen to them, and I study the Bible on my own. I pray, and all this has come together, and I've seen that different denominations have different pieces of truth, and that's why they have their denomination. Other churches didn't accept that truth, so they broke off and they had their own. So the truth got all divided up. But let's put it all together here. I've already did a video studying the book of Daniel and Revelation through prophecies, right? So we can cross a couple things off, but I'll get to it after I get into Matthew 24, because this is an interesting chapter. I'm not going to read all of it. If you want, you feel free to do that. But I just want to show the first part here. Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. He's talking to Israel. He's talking to the Jews. He's talking about how false messiahs are going to come up, claiming that they're the Messiah. There's even people who are going to be coming and saying that Jesus is the Messiah, but they're going to deceive many. All right? There's going to be wars and rumors of wars and false prophets and all this stuff, right? And Jesus warns here. Did I skip the fig tree? Nope, the fig tree down there. Okay, just making sure. Right here he talks about something that happens right here, Jerusalem being besieged. It says here, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let him which be in Judea flee the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down or to take anything out of his house. Excuse me. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible they should deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Okay? Now, this happened after Jesus left. He cursed the fig tree, which represents Israel. And it started the time of the Gentiles. Right? We changed dispensations, as they call it. We went from the law to grace. And I don't mean from the Ten Commandments to doing whatever you want. I mean from the ceremonial law to grace. Because the ceremonial law was all fulfilled by Jesus. And that's the other commandments that are tied to the Ten Commandments, which is usually called the Law of Moses. I can get into more detail about that into another video. But Here's a depiction, I guess, of Jerusalem being besieged. They were completely surrounded by the Romans. But when the Romans came and besieged Israel, and they surrounded Israel, those who listened to Jesus knew it was time to get out. And interesting enough, that once they circled Jerusalem, I think it was the emperor died. And there was about a 6-month period where these soldiers had no orders of what they were to do. So they just stood down and held up ground for 6 months, letting people come and go because they were just there. And all the Christians got out of Jerusalem, and not a Christian perished during the siege. But after that, they besieged Jerusalem for about 5 months, I think it was, and starved them out to the point where people were eating their own children. It became very vicious inside, basically famines and some of the plagues being poured out there. I'm not saying that's what the Revelation plagues were being poured out. I'm giving it as it was like it. And then the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, that not one stone was standing on another, and melted down all the gold and everything. They just took it down. God stopped protecting them. The fig tree was left withered, and it, like I said, it moved to the time of the Gentiles to grace, right? We can see this here because it sounded like it was rain, kind of distracted me for a second. But Jesus again warns, if they say he's a desert, the secret chambers, all this stuff, don't believe it. Don't believe it, right? Because when Jesus returns, he's coming in the sky, and he's going to have his saints with him. And before he comes down, he's raising the saints up from the dead and those who are alive up to him. And that's how you're going to know that it's Jesus. If he says he's in the desert, some secret chamber, or he's the one doing miracles and all this other stuff, that's not him. It's a deception. And if you know God, you know the Bible, you will not be deceived by this. But anyway, it says here, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and shall all tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now, this makes it seem like that tribulation thing did not happen the way it was supposed to. Like, this is something in the future, because it says immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. Now, this is something that was actually depicted in history, but not after what happened to Jerusalem. That's something you should look up, as it ties into the prophecies I showed about Daniel and Revelation. But, yeah. And after these things happen, then shall appear the Son of Man in heaven. And I'll come back to this and the sun being darkened and all that later on. Another thing here is Jesus gives a lesson about the fig tree. He's saying, watch the signs, because you can tell when the fig tree is ready and it's putting forth its leaves and it starts to produce fruit, but then you have to wait for the fruit to be ripe before you pluck it. Well, watch and be wary. You see all these things being fulfilled, then it's as if the leaves are coming out and the fruit is blossoming and they're becoming ripe. That's like watching the prophecies. You're seeing this tree grow and you're like, hey, it's coming. People don't listen. And then the leaves start to sprout. The fruit starts to come out, gets nice and fat, and then it starts to ripen. And that's when it's time. It says here, which is interesting, he just warns the Jews about the tribulation, right? But then he comes back to when he's going to actually show up, right? And he says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the day of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, and even in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And, whoops, and they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the other one shall be taken, and the other one left." Now you see here, this is some interesting things that you have to pick out, because you have to pay attention to the Gentiles and the Jews, Israel. There's a separation here, because Noah wasn't an Israelite. He's a Gentile, right? And he's like, it's as if in the days of Noah, right? So it's not right after that tribulation that happened to Jerusalem, because no one's going to know. People are having a good time, right? They don't think anything of it, which is weird, because there's supposed to be the Antichrist around, right? There's supposed to be this great tribulation, but no one's going to really know. But all of a sudden, Noah enters the ark. The Gentiles all of a sudden are gone, as it's depicting here. Two are on the field, one's taken. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, and one is taken, the other left. Right? This is a sign he's telling to Israel. You're going to see fruit being plucked. They're ripe, they're ready. These Gentiles, the time of the Gentiles is going to be over. And just like when the time of Israel was over and Jesus rose from the dead, he rose up the saints with him, and they went up to heaven. The first fruits. This is the same thing. It's the first fruits of the Gentiles here. First, those who died in Christ, and then those who are alive and remain enter into the ark. Right? And that's why he's saying, "Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour the Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore ye be also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh." So no one's really going to expect this, but you need to watch, because there's going to, a sign that this is coming is there is people who are taken. That's what he's telling Israel. "Who then is faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkard, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and he shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So there's going to be some that know that he's coming, but they think, oh, he's delaying it. Maybe it won't be for another 5, 10, 20, 50 years. Maybe I'll be dead. So they start to just enjoy the pleasures of the world. Not going to be so good for them, you know. The waiting and the patience that you have to have is just kind of weeding out the wheat from the tares, showing who are the true sons and daughters of God. All right? And I know you're going to read other passages and say, well, what about the tribulation, the last trump? What about the Antichrist being revealed? Well, like I showed in my study of Daniel and Revelation, the last two videos I posted, that time of tribulation has already passed. The man of sin has been revealed, but the whole world is deceived. So let's do a quick recap here. Well, a little bit of a recap, but we're going to first get into this thing here. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. I'm going to read this little paragraph here. It says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there coming a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition," destruction, "who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was with you I told you these things, and now ye know that withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time? For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with his spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusions, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." Okay, this man of sin, this man of perdition, the son of perdition, this guy has already been revealed. This man claims to be God on earth, above every other god. He claims to own the souls of men, claims to be able to change the law of God, that has the keys to heaven and earth, and whatever they bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever they loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. They speak great blasphemies and are incredibly lawless. Iniquity is a lawlessness. They give out indulgences and just forgiveness by confessing your sin to a priest and saying some Hail Marys. By your own works, you can be as good as God. By your own work. The Pope is the Antichrist. The dragon gave him his power. This dragon who was chasing the woman was the Roman Empire. The dragon passes on his authority to the Pope. The Pope becomes fully established in 538 AD, coming up from the fallen Roman Empire that split into 10 kingdoms, the 10 horns. 3 horns were uprooted: the Visigoths, the Vandals, and the Iruli. Those were 3 kings that were ripped up for not going along with the papal edict. So they were torn up. So this little horn came up and uprooted those 3 kings and became the head of the Roman Empire that was broken up, just like it says in Daniel that it's mixed up of iron and clay. It's broken up, but it's together, but it doesn't really cling together all too well. And the Pope claims to be the vicar of Christ, Christ on earth, God on earth. And the only way for you to be saved is to be under his thumb and authority, to be part of his church. And the church is a woman in the Bible, and that's Babylon, because Babylon was replaced by Medo-Persia. Medo-Persia was replaced by Greece. Greece was replaced by Rome. Rome was replaced by Papal Rome. They're in the spot of Babylon. And that was when the church married the state, married the world, became Roman, Holy Roman Empire. And that's where you see this son of perdition sitteth in the temple of God, because what are we told the temple of God is? all of us, the believers. This guy sits among us claiming to be God, speaking great blasphemies. And all those worship him. They worship him because of a strong delusion that they might be damned because they believe not the truth, but they have pleasure in unrighteousness. These are the people that go after the flesh, the people who like hierarchies. They like to be above other people. That's why they're unrighteous. And you may be saying, well, it's supposed to be one man. One man's the Antichrist. Well, 1 John chapter 2, the only place where it's mentioned Antichrist, it says here, little children, it is the last time, and as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come. It's like one person, right? Even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know that is the last time. And this Antichrist word, right? They put one who opposes Christ. But this word, let's see if we can find it here. It can mean opposed to Christ, but it can also mean in place of Christ or usurping Christ. So this person is claiming to be Christ. You know how we'd have false prophets and those who claiming to be Christ but fooling many? The Pope is claiming to be Jesus on earth, claiming to be the Christ, the Messiah, and are fooling the world. Because even those that don't even believe in him still believe that that's who he is, you know? Even though they might not be Catholic. Or, you know, they might be an atheist, a Muslim. Doesn't matter. See, it says Antichrist, either one who puts himself in the place of or the enemy, opponent of the Messiah. And let's give a little description of him before I move on here. It says here, whereby we know that it is the last time. And there's that main Antichrist, because what we're going to read later on in Revelation, Satan gets kicked out of heaven, and he ends up becoming on the seat of the Roman Empire, and he rages war against the saints, and they go out into the wilderness, and he has that power for a times and a dividing a time, for 42 months, for 1260 days. Excuse me. And we'll get into that, and it'll be more of a review from the Bible study I did on the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation. But anyway, let me finish this up here. It says, they went out from among us. They went out from us, but they were not of us, for if they had been of us, they would not have no doubt continued with us. But they went out, that they might be made manifest that they were not all of us. But ye have an unction from the Holy One, and ye all know all things. So these antichrists that came out, they were of the Christian people. They were among the people that were with the apostles. I have not written unto you because ye know not the truth, but because ye know it, and that no lie is of the truth. Who is a liar but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ? He is Antichrist, that denieth the Father and the Son. Whosoever denieth the Son, the same hath not the Father. But he that acknowledgeth the Son hath the Father also. Let that therefore abide in you, which ye have heard from the beginning. If that which ye have heard from the beginning shall remain in you, ye also shall continue in the Son and in the Father. Now, the Pope has come out saying it's a dangerous thing to follow Jesus. I mean, this guy's speaking blasphemies all the time, but nobody looks at him as the Antichrist. At all. Nobody. And that time of tribulation, you know what, I'll wait to come back into that, but I'll finish this little part up here. Jesus says to call no man father, because you have one Father who is in heaven. The Pope means father. He's getting everybody to call him father. He calls himself the head of the church. Jesus is the head of the church. He's usurping Jesus' spot on earth in the church. He is the Antichrist, the son of perdition, the man of sin. He doesn't love his fellow man. He wants you all to build up a hierarchy, so he's at the top of the pyramid. You give all your money to him, and if you want to help the poor, you do it with your money. They'll do a bake sale, a raffle, some bingo, a food drive. You give what you got to the poor. The church ain't going to give what they got. That's for them to build up their giant cathedrals that have their fancy clothes and their golden crucifixes and golden cups of wine. Yeah, it's not for you. Anyway, for that times, and a dividing of time. 42 months, 1260 days. Well, Ezekiel 4:6, it says, "And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year." Right? And it's funny that right over here, it talks about 1260 days. Just what we're getting into in Revelation, or the 42 months in Revelation. Because that's what we're given in prophecy is a day for a year. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness. Each day was a representation of the 40 years that Israel was wandering in the desert. We're given a day for a year. So if you study the Bible, you know these things, so these things don't sound all weird to you. It's only those who get close to God who will see these things. Because you'll study and you'll compare everything and you'll figure it out. You follow a church, you follow man, you're not really going to see things too clearly. You got to get into the Bible yourself. Get to know God yourself. And I do recommend the King James, but if you don't have one of those or you got trouble with some areas reading that, I would say the English Standard Version is pretty easy to read. It's in the same kind of style as the King James, but more modern English. But it is missing some things, some verses and whatnot. So I'd stick for the King James as your foundation and just look at like something like the ESV, if you speak English, obviously, and do Strong's Concordance and what have you. Because then you learn things like this about the Antichrist. It's not just one who's the enemy of the Messiah, but one who puts himself in the place of, which is exactly what the Pope does. It's right there in your face. But they get you thinking all backwards. You see how they completely mixed everything up, where there's people who think the tribulation's in the future. So therefore, we have to wait till after that right before that happens, that's when we're going to get raptured. We're going to get raptured before then. Right? And people are like, no, the tribulation has to happen first. So they're like, no, we have to wait for the rapture. The rapture comes first. And then there's going to be a great tribulation. Right? No. The people are right. We're raptured after the tribulation, but it already happened. That's what we're going to get into here. I already went into it in the Bible prophecies that of Daniel and Revelation, but we'll get into it real quick here. All the times that it mentions it, I think it's like 4 times. 4 times. Right here, it says down here, but let's give a little bit ahead of time to see a little context. It says, "And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. By the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months, and I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days in sackcloth." This is the same period of time. The Gentiles are trampling over the city for that 1,260 days, which is right here, 1,200 score. A score is 20, so 3 of them is 60. And 42 months, each month is 30 days. You get the same time. So then, yeah. It's talking about the same thing going on. So while this is going on, the two witnesses are doing their thing, but they're in sackcloth. And I'm not going to say I know who or what the two witnesses are, right? But I would say that it's the Old and New Testament. That would be my guess, because they're the witnesses of God. All the witnesses that wrote stuff down of their experiences with God wrote them down, and that's where we get our Old and New Testament. Get some water here. So, yeah, I would say it is the Bible, because people started reading that stuff, and we had the Dark Ages where the Catholic Church was trying to hide that stuff, and that's where we have a famine, not of bread, but of the Word of God. So that is one of the plagues, and all these stuff happened throughout this tribulation. It was one of the worst times in history, and you may be thinking, well, we lived and people were fine, but you're looking at the flesh and not the spirit. It was spiritually dead, spiritually dark, and Islam started to rise up, and things just got worse. There was even plagues in Europe, the Black Plague, the bubonic plague. A lot of this stuff that we're read about in Revelation has already actually happened. That's why we can actually look forward to the rapture, because this time period started when the man of sin came into power in 538 AD. So if this a day for a year, 1260 days after 538, we get to 1798. That's when Napoleon gave this beast a deadly wound by removing the head of the beast, the Pope, and imprisoning him. But he was only in prison for about 5 years, and there was a Pope reinstated. So the head was healed, and people were like amazed, because they're like, who can wage war against this beast? Because they took him down, they took the Pope out, but he's back, and every country has some portion of their citizens as Catholics that aren't going to support a war or dethroning the Pope. So who can actually wage war except for God himself? And the Pope is reinstated, so they saw that this guy's head was healed. So they started to say, this tribulation's over, we can be raptured at any time. Hence why after 1800 you started getting the rapture preaching. Right? But other things still needed to happen, like in Daniel chapter 7, where this Pope is established as a king, because he's already the head of the Roman Empire that really isn't well put together, but he is officially stated as a king and the king of the Vatican City that's separate from Italy in 1929. And from that time, there were 7 kings, and Francis would be the 8th, but a lot of Catholics say that he's not actually the 8th king, and he doesn't even acknowledge himself as the king, so he's kind of like a placeholder. So the 8th king, who's of the 7, hasn't even been put in place yet, as it seems. But if not, he's the 8th, and if he's the 8th, we're at the end. We're at the end. This rapture's at any time. Could be right now, it could be in 5 years, maybe 20 years, but we're right at the end. So you need to get ready. We'll look at a couple more, the rest of the places it mentions this. Alright? Uh, Revelation 12, there's a wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon, and she gives birth to Jesus, and the dragon wants to kill Jesus, which Herod tried to do, and then the Roman Empire actually ended up doing, and the woman had to flee after the child was taken up into heaven. He was caught up to God, and then the woman had to flee into the wilderness for 1,203 score days. This is the same thing that was mentioned in Revelation. It's just giving you another part of the story, right? And that happened in 538. And that persecution really got started, where the Catholic Church not only would kill off Christians, those that wouldn't accept him as the head of the church, but it would also kill off Jews. But anyway, I think it mentions that time again down here. And when the dragon saw that he was cast onto earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for times, and half a time. A time is a year, times is 2 years, so half a time is half a year. That is the 1260 days, 30-day months. Something. I think I did my math wrong right there, but I can come back to that. From the face of the serpent, and the serpent was cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. The dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. And that's exactly what the dragon's doing. If you're actually one of those, that's what they're doing. The Jesuits, they have an oath to kill off the Protestant race. They call them a race of people because they're God's children, different from Satan's children, and he wants them dead. And a flood comes out of the mouth, and it's interesting because the Vatican means divine serpent or divining serpent, and they have a weird ass building that looks like a snake head, and when you come in it looks like snake teeth, and that you're coming into the mouth of a snake with its eyes watching you when you're sitting in the pews listening to the Pope. I'll put a picture of it as the clip, whatever they call it, the clip to look at the video. I'll probably put a couple here at the end of the video so you can take a look at it yourself. But anyway, there is stories of like the Catholic Spaniards coming up to England, the Protestants at the time, to wipe them out, but their whole fleet, the Spanish Armada, was wiped out by a storm. Just an example of the serpent trying to wipe out this seed, and the earth actually helping God's people and protecting them. Anyway, one more time, I think it's mentioned right here, 40 and 2 months again. So we're going to read what is reigning for this time. And it says, and I stood up, I keep saying up, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. That's where the Pope got his power, was from that dragon, the Roman Empire, that was trying to destroy Israel and Jesus. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. This was in 1978. The deadly wound happened. And all the world wondered after the beast, and worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Because as we're saying, you can't defeat him. And there were given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and a power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth and blasphemed against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell therein. So we see here, he was given power to continue for 42 months. That's when the deadly wound happened. And this whole time he's blaspheming God and his name, his tabernacle, and those that dwell in heaven. He's doing all the time about prayers to saints and prayers to Mary. And Jesus isn't the mediator. Mary is, or some saint, somebody else that you're praying to, and you're putting up all these idols and all this stuff. So you're worshiping a piece of wood, a piece of plastic, or plaster, or metal of some kind. He was given to make war with the saints, and that's exactly what Papal Rome has done and still is doing. They just don't have the same power and authority to just outright do it. But yeah, that's all the times that it's mentioning this connects to this beast that has been reigning this whole time. The man of sin has already been revealed. This tribulation period has already happened. A lot of these plague stuff has already happened. Yet, I still think there is more. Because, like I said, Jesus, he returns after the tribulation. He says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. I said I was going to come back to this. You look into this, sun being darkened, moon shall not give her light, and the stars fall from heaven. Interesting things happened after 1978. 1798. 1798. Not 1978. 1798 AD. And then you're going to see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, right? A lot of these things have already happened. Now, all the nations destroying Babylon has not happened yet. I do not know if we're going to be taken before that or not. That might be the actual end, and that's what I was going to get into here. This besiegement of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is supposed to represent the world. The reason why God picked out Israel and set them apart is that he wanted to show the world an example of how you're supposed to live, an example of God, example of Jesus, but also an example of the world, because there was different tribes in Israel, and they represented the world. And the time of the Gentiles is the time of the nations, the time of the world. That's where we're in right now. It's not centered on Israel. It's centered on everybody of the world. And at the end, they're encircled. And I think the Romans represented Jesus' army. And why do I think that? Well, because at any time Israel was backsliding, God said he was going to punish them by sending his armies. And he would send the Babylonians or the Grecians or something. He would send the Gentiles, saying that they were his armies. So I think the Romans, he was saying, represented the end of the world. And they show up, and what happens when they show up? The Christians leave. And then the world goes through hell. And I think that's when the nations turn on basically Babylon, the Roman Catholic Church, and finally destroy it. And then Jesus is going to set up his kingdom in Israel. He's going to return with all the saints and the angels. So, I think that about wraps it up. So let's just go over here and go to Vatican Let's go to meaning. We'll look at this first before we end the video. Whoops. Vatican meaning. Maybe I should put definition. Check this out, because it might be etymology, it might be dictionary. Oh, see, it's just telling you the place where the Pope lives and works. It's not telling you the meaning of the actual word. So it might be the root word or what it means in Latin or what have you. So we'll put divine serpent. And we'll go check this real quick. I'm not saying this is an awesome source, but it could give us something. So this guy says no. Literally means divine serpent. The word Vatican literally means divine serpent is derived from vatus, diviner, and can, serpent. Vatican City is St. Peter's Basilica, were built upon ancient pagan site called, in Latin, Vaticanus Mons or Vaticanus Colus, which means hill or mountain of prophecy. Oops. So there you go. So from there, let's go to Vatican serpent building. There we go. We're going to look at some of the pictures. This, yeah, you can already see some of them. This is a creepy looking thing. This is what it looks. You'd be looking at the Pope down there. You can see the teeth, the snake eyes, the scaly skin. Here it is on the outside. Looks like a snake head. You see the scales and the eyes here. And the people are coming in through the mouth here. Here's another picture of it. Look this stuff up. It's creepy stuff. It's not, they're not even really hiding it. It's right in your face, but they know that you're so blinded spiritually that they could tell you to your face and laugh about it, and you think that they were joking and just playing along and making fun of people who believe it because you're blind. But yeah, some creepy stuff. But it's all there in your face. Divine serpent, divine snakehead building in the city of the divine serpent. It's already been revealed. Rapture at any time. We're at the 8th, who's of the 7. Some say that he's of the 7 because the 7th king actually, what is his name, Benedict? He actually resigned. He, didn't die or anything like that. So the 8th king is actually continuing the 7th reign. I don't know. There's others saying that he's actually not even uh, taking kingship because he's not an ordained priest. So it's one of those things where, hey, he might be a placeholder waiting for the 8th, who might be someone like John Paul II raising from the dead that would really get people to wander after him. I don't know. Maybe something like that ain't going to happen, but it's possible to really deceive everybody. But, yeah, it can be at any time. At any time now. So anyway, thanks for watching and take care. Okay, is this still going? I guess that didn't want to work this time. Let's stop.